Janus.
Oh my!
That was about.
Get 5 coffins ready.
Hey everyone, welcome to my guide for... Is that final boss music? Janus has been one of the most prolific gods in SMITE's history, having access to mechanics and levels of utility rarely seen in any MOBA, with a heaping spoonful of damage on top of that. Janus has been in and out of favor for the past few years, after an insane run of non-stop play in SMITE's earlier years, but still remains as a force to be reckoned with, if you get out of the early game that is. More on that later. First, builds. Janus loves a good cooldown build, and while his damage is high, it's largely centered around one of his 3 core abilities in addition to his ultimate, hence the need for CDR to keep them cycling back as often as possible. Janus also benefits from on-hit items, again since he's so CDR-centric, constantly spamming his second ability. Relics-wise, it's pretty much just Beads Aegis. Beads Blink is certainly fun, but if you're trying to win, it's Beads Aegis every time. But let's get to what made Janus such a powerhouse in SMITE's earlier seasons, and still a strong god to this day, his first ability. Janus is able to place a portal down either on the floor or a wall. Portals on the floor, banishing Janus or any enemies who pass over it. Enemies who pass over it being damaged upon landing, and being able to beads at any time to immune the damage as well as the CC. Portals on walls have no effect on enemies. However, Janus or any of his allies may pass through this portal, although portals with this ability have only one use in one direction and then despawn. This is Janus' signature move, and his only form of hard CC in his entire kit, and the only form of immediate movement in his core kit. So let's get it out of the way now. Use this as a movement ability 80% of the time for yourself, 10% of the time as a movement ability for allies, and 10% of the time for CC. Don't get me wrong, the CC on this ability is excellent, but getting caught without this ability up means that you're 100% guaranteed dead, or you get your ultimate forced out, which is one of your most vital tools. So a good rule of thumb is using this ability against enemy gods when you know it'll guarantee a kill at any point in the game, or during laning when you know it's just you and a single enemy in the immediate vicinity. And of course it is still rock solid peel, and self peel as well, porting enemies off of yourself and others. But this should usually come into play later into your Janus career once you get the feel for when you should be selfish with your portals or when it's best for teammates to take them. And finally, using it on yourself. Maybe skip this one until you're well versed with Janus, as while yes, you can avoid certain abilities by doing this, but it is very difficult to time, and more often than not, the time it takes to land sets you up for easy follow-up from the enemy team. So let's quickly talk about using it as movement, which, while layered, is pretty simple. Once again, Janus, relying mostly on one ability for the core of his damage, is able to sit back just outside the range of his second ability. He not only does this to be safe, but to keep the option of backing himself out with a portal or backing a teammate out with a portal. The portal, of course, has a max range, but these walls are very few and far between, and even on walls that exceed the maximum range, there is almost certainly a section of the same wall that is usable by a portal. Now, using the portal for teammates is situational, but if it looks like they're gonna die behind a wall near you, place the portal. It's as simple as that. It's the same idea with using the portal for yourself. It's a lot like any other movement ability in that regard, it just functions differently. The only real tip here is try to learn the biggest section of each wall that you can pass through on the map to ensure maximum distance covered. Also keep in mind that you and any allies can't enter the portal while crippled, and the portal can be body blocked by an enemy, even if that only happens once in a while. It's something you get used to as you play Janus, and eventually it becomes second nature. When you're first starting out, just remember that Janus likes to stick back and close to walls. Unless of course he's chasing with his team, which he's great at thanks to his third ability. This is a pure utility ability from Janus. A simple line that when walked over, all allies will be sped up and all enemies slowed and afflicted with a mark that deals damage based on your magical power if the enemy takes damage from one of Janus' abilities. And now that this ability is leveled, Janus and all allies gain move speed when moving through Janus' portals, stacking up to 2 times. There isn't too much nuance to this ability. You use it to speed yourself up to get in range to fight, use it on your team while chasing and retreating, and of course occasionally using it on waves and enemy gods for that sweet extra damage. All I can really say is use it liberally. Janus likes to skate around the battlefield, swooping in and dealing damage and backing off, only to speed himself up again for another round, of course activating his passive in the meantime. If you thought Janus' 3 was simple, his passive is the simplest of the bunch. Anytime Janus passes over his 3 or through a portal, his next damaging ability will deal 15% extra magical scaling. This harkens back to my April Fool's Janus guide from last year, which showed Janus spamming his abilities relentlessly as they came off cooldown. And this was the reason why. You want to always have your passive up whenever you go in to deal damage, especially when it comes to wave clear with your second ability. Okay, enough blue balling, let's talk about it. Janus' second ability is a long range, slow speed projectile with this funny wavy pattern, but it actually contains 2 projectiles, one on the left and one on the right, which collide 3 times along their path in this ability. Once in Janus' face, again in the middle of the ability, and finally at the very end of the ability. And while it doesn't double the ability's damage, a bonus 30% is no joke. And that's the thing about this ability, while hitting the middle or outer portions alone does alright damage, once you start tagging on the mark from his 3, his passive, and any on-hit items, which affect all 3 at once, this ability starts easily half-hitting squishies in the later stages of the game. And so this is one of the big reasons you see so many Januses walk up and try to portal you, to ensure absolutely every nugget of damage hitting you. Mind you, they might die to a Susano 2 seconds later, but hey, it's still a lot of damage. Okay, so how do you really use this ability? Well, for wave clear, it's very simple. Stand in the center of the lane, line up the melee minions with the middle of the ability, and the archers with the very end of the ability. This ensures maximum damage on the wave, and hitting it in the center means that even if you don't get the double projectile hit, you still get good damage on the wave. Then comes team fights, and all I have to say is practice. And when I say practice, I mean practice. Not so much in jungle practice this time around. With Janus 2, you can really only learn how to hit it from actively playing against players. But hitting this ability at long ranges and at off angles is absolutely necessary. The range and damage potential, as well as just the sheer area covered, is almost unmatched in the mage category. Problem is that it's just shaped so strangely. So all I can really say is spam it. Spam this ability like your life depends on it, and slowly you'll get the muscle memory down with how to hit Janus 2 at every single opportunity. That said, if you do end up missing it, you can always just rely on the damage from your ult. Janus becomes CC immune and lines up, firing a portal which travels through the entirety of the map, leaving portals that Janus and all of his allies may use. Again, being one way, but being able to be used by more than one person. The ultimate stops dropping portals at 500 units, but will still fire through the entirety of the map. And once it reaches 800 units of travel, it gains an absurd 100% magical power scaling on its damage. But the ability itself is unable to do more than 75% of an enemy god's maximum health in one hit. So this is quite simply one of the most impactful abilities in the game, able to completely destroy squishy life bars in one hit, give entire teams crazy chase and rotation potential, and of course give Janus himself immense safety by making himself virtually impossible to catch. So let's cover the basic uses I've listed there in reverse order. First off, it's your get out of jail free card for obvious reasons. The instantaneous CC immunity while being able to move yourself closer to a wall for a swift escape. There's really nobody who can catch a Janus once he's ulted away. Well, you do still have to keep the amount of walls and again the length of your first wall in mind to an extent. Ulting through a short section of a wall into a no man's land is of course not optimal usage. Try to angle yourself so you maximize the amount of walls you pass through, as well as giving yourself a fat initial wall to pass through. Remember, this has an unlimited individual portal range, so your first portal can traverse literally any wall in the game. And keep in mind, of course, that if things go awry, your team can come for the trip too. So if you can, give usage of this a delay so your team can follow suit with you. As for rotating with the ult, it's lost plenty of effectiveness as the map has grown wider and wider. But still, Janus ulting yourself and your jungler into a lane at around the Gold Fury or Fire Giant respectively is still a great option, and no mid laner can hope to match your rotation. In the same vein, let's move on to using it as chase with your team. For chase, this should be pretty self-explanatory. If your team gets a kill or trunks a character that opens the team fight for you, you should be ulting in whatever direction the enemy team is going for your team to chase. If you're newer to SMITE, the best way to know if this has happened is just watch the body language of both teams. If the enemy team seems to drop everything and start retreating after one of their members dies or gets trunked, it's time to start considering ulting. Just follow your tank's lead in this type of situation. The enemy team can of course simply play around this by sticking in lane, making portals a non-issue, but this leads into using the ult for raw damage. Let's first talk about using it in team fights. Sometimes you just need to deal damage quickly, and when your 2 is down, your ultimate is a great option. And to be honest, it's extremely hard to avoid at closer distances. That said, you really only want to use this ability purely for damage when you know it's going to get the kill or almost certainly enable your teammates to get the kill. So how does that mindset translate for snipes? Now, Janus snipes are totally infamous for swiping away egregious amounts of health from squishies at ridiculous distances. But when do you know to go for one? Honestly guys, other than around objectives wherein you should always shoot for an angled shot directly at the objective itself, Janus snipes are just kind of free throws. Don't get me wrong, there is thought that goes into it. Where is this person going to back? Are they going to be backed before my ult reaches them? And etc. You kind of have to put yourself in the shoes of your target and ult where you think you'd place yourself in their situation. On to leveling. You want your 2 at level 1, your 1 at level 2, and your 3 at level 3. From there you of course max your 2, but leveling between your 1 and your 3 is up for debate. I personally max the 3, but if you're in a matchup where you can drop a lot of portals for some extra damage, of course that's preferable. I've just always liked how maxing the 3 feels for me. And of course level that ult whenever you can. Janus is one of the all-time great gods in SMITE, but at this point I wouldn't call him necessary to learn or anything. He pops in and out of the meta, but his days of domination are long gone, especially after numerous nerfs to his ultimate. That said though, a good Janus will put even the best players on the back foot where other gods couldn't. No god can move themselves or their team around the map quite as well as Janus can. Almost. And once you perfect how to utilize your 2, you'll find few mages who can poke as often or for as big an impact as Janus can. But of course until very late into the game, he lacks that big pop ability or combo that will just destroy a team fight, and really only makes his impact felt in longer trades and fights. And not to mention that his early game is truly awful. The current conduit gem helps him a lot, but who knows how long that current version will last. And even with it, Janus still struggles with clearing and making a real impact before his first back, which as I'm sure you know, is more than long enough for the entire match to go awry. Stick with him though, and the later the the game goes, the better Janus feels, and the more opportunities he'll have to be a portal dropping, objective stealing, squishy bursting nuisance for the enemy team. Janus is hard to write for, since he's so dependent on player awareness and benefits heavily from how much experience you have in SMITE, but that certainly doesn't mean he's impossible for new players to learn, and in a lot of ways, Janus can age and wisen you with his myriad of potential plays. I would drop the mic, but it's on a stand, so that's all I have on Janus for now. Thanks for watching.